looking forward to for a couple of months now. It's all about marketing online and navigating the paradox of choice and visual merchandising and why artificial intelligence isn't enough. And we're going to find out about digital sequencing and why that is a retailer's secret weapon. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce André, who is the CEO of Advanced Commerce and is going to come walk us through this session today. So welcome, André. How are you? And welcome to Tame Bay Live.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So visual merchandising, what's it all about, and what is display sequencing and how can it help us?
Sure. Okay. Well, perhaps I could just start by giving a quick introduction to everybody. So for everybody who doesn't know me, my name is André Brown. As Chris said, I'm the founder and chief exec of Advanced Commerce. And just by way of background, I've been involved in e-commerce for a long time. And probably my claim to fame is that I was the co-founder and former chief exec of Attract Group, which is a company that I ran for 15 years, and really grew that from zero to become the leading European player in the search and merchandising world. And then I left in 2018 to start Advanced Commerce. So as Chris said, I'm going to talk about three things. It's the challenge facing retailers, which is really about navigating the paradox of choice. What is visual merchandising and why is it important? And then, as Chris mentioned, why AI alone won't do it. So,
fantastic.
Thank you.
I'd just like to remind everyone, this is going to be such an interesting session. You're bound to have questions. Just beneath your screen, you'll see a chat box if you're watching this live, and you'll be able to drop questions in there that'll come straight through to André and myself and get through as many of them as we can at the end. If you're watching this online, then obviously you'll get André's contact details to find out more.
Thank you. So the challenge facing retailers is that we as consumers now face this paradox of choice. And this was an idea first proposed by American psychologist Barry Schwartz. And his premise is that the more choice we have, the harder we find it to make a decision. And this is particularly true of the online world where, in theory, there are no limits to how many products you could put on display, whereas in the physical store, you're actually limited by floor space. So really the job of a retailer is to help shoppers navigate that paradox of choice. And as an example, I wanted to use Netflix. So I grew up in a world where there were only 3 TV channels: BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. So back then, the choice was pretty simple. Fast forward to today, to Netflix, and you have a TV platform with an almost infinite range of choice. And as they've increased the volume of programs available, it has also made it much harder for you as a consumer to make a choice. So how have Netflix responded to this challenge? Well, they've added visual merchandising to their platform, i.e. they've taken control of their product curation, and then rather than showing you absolutely everything that's available, they've curated category lists. And quite often it's based on things like continue watching, if you like X, you might like Y, top 10, new in, etc. So each category has a controlled number of options available with the specific intention of making it easier for you to make a choice, hence helping shoppers navigate that paradox of choice. But as a subtext, I would say if you're an online merchandiser, then within that kind of framework, your challenge also is to make sure that stock doesn't go on sale. And I think this points to a dichotomy that exists within retail. And the dichotomy is this: there's a big focus on bestsellers. But actually, if you're a merchandiser, you may not care that much about what's selling well. What you might have concerns about is, how do I shift the stock that we bought recently that just isn't selling? So your focus very much is how to avoid stuff going on sale. And of course, the answer to that is visual merchandising, which neatly leads us to the next section. Oops, sorry, my screen's getting a bit slow. So what is visual merchandising and why is it important? So visual merchandising is all about controlling the product curation, or I often refer to it as the product display sequence. So what goes where on your site, and specifically in what order? And the reason that is important is that most sites have a problem with high visitor bounce rates. And essentially, this is an attention problem. And you'll recognize this from your own browsing behavior. A study by Microsoft, I think in 2015, suggested that people's attention span started to decline after only 8 seconds, which I think is 1 second less than a goldfish. And in practice, what that means is that a typical visitor to your site is only going to look at the first 2 or 3 pages on your site. And therefore, they'll only see a very small fraction of what's available from the whole online catalog. And typically, that could be as small as 3 to 5%. So that means that the decisions that you take as a retailer about what products to show first becomes incredibly important, much like the care and attention that retailers would pay to shelf space in a physical store. And it's basically the same attention problem, but this is the attention problem online, and it's much more acute than the attention problem in store. But once you know that, once you realize that, you start to think differently about the importance of visual merchandising. And really what I'm saying is that the product display sequence is a retailer's secret weapon. And by way of illustration, the display sequence on the left-hand side is just based on what's new. So there's nothing special to the sequencing. It's just, boom, comes out the database, what's new. For example, on the right-hand side has been specifically sequenced by warm colors. And the reason for that is it's being targeted at a segment who have a preference for warmer colors. So once you know you've got people who prefer warmer colors, and you know they're only going to look at the first 1, 2, or 3 pages, why wouldn't you show them the warm colored stuff first? And hopefully that's a good illustration of the importance of the product display sequence. Then I'm going to come to the final section, which is to talk about AI. And obviously, there's a huge focus on AI at the moment. It's very important. And I wanted to preference what I was saying by saying that look, AI is very powerful and it's very useful. We make use of it within our platform to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So really what I'm talking about is not relying solely on AI. So make use of it, but don't be driven by it. And the reason I say that is over time, we've seen a number of flaws in the AI model. And it's important that you know what they are. So the first flaw in the model is the assumption that past behavior is a good indicator of future behavior. Now, I know that might sound a bit jarring because on the face of it, that seems a reasonable assumption to make. What you've done in the past will suggest what you might do in the future. That seems a reasonable assumption to make. But it doesn't hold true for big ticket items that you might only buy occasionally. So if I've just bought a new sofa or a new camera or a new set of golf clubs, it's unlikely that I'm going to be in the market anytime soon for a repeat purchase. And the assumption that past behavior is a good indicator of future behavior doesn't allow for changes in style or even size. But the reality is our tastes change over time and our sizes might change over time. So when I was younger, I was quite fussy about food. I'm much more adventurous now. And as I've got older, my taste in chocolate, for example, has changed from milk chocolate to dark chocolate. And as I mentioned, over time, our size and shape can change, and that will affect the style of clothes that we might want to buy. So the assumption that past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior doesn't always hold true, and you need to know that. The next flaw in the AI model is it assumes that you're always buying for yourself. Again, another reasonable assumption to make, but in practice, we know that is often not the case. So I sometimes get some strange product recommendations from Amazon, for example. And of course, that's been driven by what I've bought. So if I buy something for my aunt, as an example, then guess what? I'm probably going to get product recommendations that are suitable for her, not for me. And then this problem is compounded. This problem is compounded by the fact that often in a household, a single device and or a single login can be used by multiple people to make purchases. So, we have an iPad in the living room, everybody tends to make the purchase on that device. So effectively, all of those personas can get rolled up into one profile. So these are some significant flaws in the AI model that you need to know about. But probably the biggest one is this idea that, it's, by definition, it's retrospective and can't predict the future. And the reason for that is it uses historic data to create a model and then views the future through the lens of that model. So let's take X factor as an analogy. So AI would build a model and say, hey, we know what an ideal boy band looks like. So there's always going to be 5 of them. One's going to wear a leather coat all the time, and one's going to have an emo haircut or something like that. Right? So they know what a boy band should look like. AI would also tell you we know what an ideal female singer looks like and what an ideal girl band would look like. So it views everything through the model it has built. And the problem with that is it becomes a self-sustaining model. And eventually everything looks pretty much the same. So there's not much differentiation. And much like cars today, all look the same pretty much because they're designed by computers in wind tunnels. So you don't get new trends within the AI system because the AI system is retrospective using data. So back to the example of X factor. So in the AI model, what happens when a young Freddie Mercury turns up? Okay, he doesn't fit into the AI model. They've not seen anything like him before, and there's no data to make a decision on. So guess what? Computer says no. So once you know this, that basically AI is retrospective, I think it then presents a very significant, almost existential question to retailers. And that is, do you want to be a trendsetter or an order taker? So being a trendsetter means differentiating yourself from the crowd and ultimately determining your future. Whereas I would contend that over-relying on AI effectively turns you into an order taker without much thought about what you're merchandising. And that also history would suggest that being an order taker means eventually it turns into a race to the bottom on price. And that's not a good place to be, as we all know. So Final slide. If you want to be a trendsetter, you need to differentiate yourself from the crowd and take ownership of your future. And to do that, I really think you need to embrace this concept that the product display sequence is your secret weapon. And to do that, you need a merchandising tool that will allow you to do that. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with everybody today. Appreciate people listening. We've got a group demo booked at 4 o'clock on Monday. You can find details of that in our profile within the Tame Bay portal. And then if you want to contact me, you can contact me through the Tame Bay portal or LinkedIn, or you can email me. There we go. Any questions?
Fantastic, Andre. I have got a whole string of questions already. We haven't got anything in the audience yet, but if you would like to submit a question, there's a button just below the screen that you're watching this on live. But this is fascinating, and binning Freddie Mercury from X Factor, that would just be hilarious. But it also reminded me of Susan Boyle, who really didn't fit the model either.
That's true.
You've been quite contentious today. But first of all, that obvious focus on bestsellers is an easy trap to fall into. The common Alan Sugar, smell what's selling and do more of it, and suggest that you do follow your bestsellers. But that begs the question of, how do you track your slow-moving stock? And obviously, you know if you just had a big order of stock come in and it's just sitting on the shelf, it's there. But what happens to stock that's maybe been there a couple of months or a couple of weeks and it's just not selling? How do you know when is the time to start merchandising it, and which customers to merchandise it to make it start moving?
Sure. So that's a very interesting question. And you could think of the online world as being a metaphor for the shop window. So if I walk down the high street and I walk past the store and I look in the shop window, they don't just put their best sellers in the shop window. So typically they'll show you something that's really trending right now, it's really hot right now. They'll show you things that are new this season. They'll show bestsellers, and then they'll show other stuff mixed in that might be on sale or stuff they're trying to push. So why do they do that? Well, they'll show you stuff that's trending right now because that will grab your attention because it's new. You haven't seen it before. They'll show you bestsellers because if they don't know anything else about you, if the stuff that's new and trending has dragged you into the store, showing you bestsellers is their best guess at what you might buy. So it's a blend. And that's what merchandising is about, is creating a blended sequence. And that's what you need to do in the online world. So, to answer your question about, well, how do we know what's selling and how do we target people? Well, I mean, whatever e-com platform you're on should report on what's selling. Certainly in our platform, we report on, views, clicks, add to basket purchases, and we do that by product and also by category. It's quite useful to understand which of your categories have the poorest click-through rate, for example. How do you know who to target? Well, most retailers have already invested in some kind of segmentation technology. So you should be able to segment your consumers by a number of different metrics. So, one of the important ones is, are you a new or returning visitor? And, how frequent are your returns? So it's, there's no magic bullet with any of this. And I mean, I think this is why I've commented about AI, because I think a lot of people think it's a silver bullet, and it just isn't. I mean, it's useful and we use it, but it isn't just, it's not like a widget that you turn on and magically it makes money for you.
Yeah, I have to admit, I do chuckle at Tesco's, because during the pandemic, I've not only done my own shopping at Tesco's, I've also done all of my mother's shopping for the last 2 years. And I can guarantee my list of favourites and suggested, 50% of it is stuff I would never buy to eat myself, but my mum loves, and vice versa.
Well, that's a good illustration of the point. If you buy for other people, you get their recommendations. It's also an interesting point you made. I think I read that the online traffic went up by about 40% because of lockdown, and it really pushed people that perhaps weren't frequent online visitors. It really pushed everybody online. And I think, once you've discovered the convenience of buying things online, even if it's things like cosmetics, for example, why would you go back? So, although there's obviously, a bulge because of COVID, I think some things like cosmetics and groceries, I think a lot of that volume will stay online now.
So I want to dig a bit more into how to segment users. Obviously, I've screwed Tesco's like there's no tomorrow. But assuming you've got someone that is, let's assume that they're logged in, so they've got an account, so you know who they are pretty much all the time, whether other people use the device or not. This one's logged in, so it's good data, unless they're sharing their account. But how do you segment users? You were talking about segmenting users based on a preference for warm colours. Now, I can kind of get that people know I'm male, I'm in my 50s, I live in southern England, I've got a preference, let's say on eBay, for buying a few clothes, some text products, some home and garden products. But how do you delve down into the segmenting by, say, the warm colours, which I find really interesting?
Sure.
How do I even decide that attributes like warm colours are something I should be segmenting for? And is this something that I should be relying on AI to a certain extent to gather the data which I then act on? Or should I be instructing the AI that I want you to segment on warm colours, or for some it might be autumn colours or winter colours or summer colours, or
sure,
etc.
Okay, so let's start off when we talked about warm colours. So within our platform, we have something called a merchandising concept. So warm colours is an example of a merchandising concept. So what it does, it allows you to create a concept, warm colours, and then to define what do we actually mean by warm colours. And we defined it as certain colours, and that became warm colours. Or I could do something similar. I could create a concept called Spring 2022, and then define, well, what do I think are the colours for Spring 2020?
Funnily enough, we've just had a question from the audience who's asked about the first slide, saying the warm colours are mixed with some vibrant colours. Is there a reason why there'd be a mix of styles? And if we know the seller would rather have warm, would there be a need to be offering other styles too? So right on point.
Sure. Let me just read that again. Well, I mean, it just came down to a definition of what did the client consider warm colours to be. This actually raises another interesting point. So I'm just going to give a quick shout out to one of my partner companies, a company called Recipe, and they provide a lot more product attribute information. And then that becomes really useful, because if we can include things like length, styles, you can end up producing much more accurate lists or recommendations to customers. So getting back to how do we know that somebody has a preference for warmer colours? So it may well be that their clients are already using AI on their system to track that. We have something we call persona-based merchandising, which looks to do something similar. So as you know, third-party cookies are being phased out, and we also know most people only log in at the checkout.
Yeah.
So for most of the time, you don't know who somebody is. So what persona-based merchandising lets you do is to describe certain personas, and then describe what's a trigger before we say you're this persona. So for example, I might have a persona called Bargain Hunter, and my triggers could be, well, somebody's responded to an email that was already segmented to that Bargain Hunter group. or they've responded to a Facebook ad that again was targeted at them. Or it could be, they came on the site and the first thing they clicked on was the sale category. Or it could be they've searched for sale or something like that. So, with persona-based merchandising, you can actually start to create your own personas and say, well, these are the triggers that determine whether you're one persona or another. And the reason to do that is just to give different merchandising strategies to those different personas. So if I'm a bargain hunter, I'm probably going to get a merchandising strategy that's based on showing me things that are on sale or cheap with good stock levels and probably ascending price order. If I'm another persona, let's say fashionista, I'm probably going to get a sequence that's based on what's new and descending price. So kind of what I want, you might call that high value trending. I'm going to show you things that are new, trending, so they're hot, but I'm going to show you higher price items first. And actually that kind of sequence should have the effect of boosting your AOV, because you're kind of riding the wave of what's hot right now, but I'm going to show you the more expensive things first. Again, it's a good example of why sequencing is so important.
So this is really fascinating. And I want to dig a little bit into the tech. Can you tell us a bit more about advanced commerce and
Sure.
what you can actually do for us? Because I think that will ground the conversation if we understand a little bit more about how we can actually power it.
Sure. So the first thing to say is this is my second time building a merchandising software business. And generally, when you do something a second time, you tend to do it better and quicker, hopefully. And I've certainly
the first one you did then.
Yeah, I've certainly had a lot of time to reflect on how would I do things differently. So I think the first thing to say is, we've designed the platform to outperform everything. It has a lot of unique functionality in it. It is enterprise grade merchandising, but it's very much aimed at the small and mid-tier retailer. So it's been designed with ease of use in mind. And normally everybody who looks at it says, oh, that UI looks really easy to use. What else can I tell you? So it's visual merchandising, it's site search, and it's product recommendations all in one platform. We've built everything ourselves. It's all been written from scratch in the last 2.5 years. For those techie people watching, it's been built with an API-first architecture. So it would fit into the headless commerce world, which a lot of people are moving towards.
And importantly, what platforms can I plug it into? What shop fronts can it plug into?
Sure. So there are 4 deployment options. The first is there's a headless commerce option, which obviously is API to API. So in theory, it will plug into any platform. There's one specific application for Shopify, and then there's some generic options for using JavaScript. So far, we're live on Magento 2. We're live on an in-house system. In fact, several actually, where they've done it in-house. We're even live on Shopware, which is a German.
We know Shopware well.
Yeah, so really, it should work with any platform. As I say, there's a lot of interest now with headless commerce because that kind of gives the control back to the retailer. They can just do their best of breed implementations, which we're very happy with. It's all written in the Microsoft.NET stack, and it sits on the Microsoft Azure hosting platform. So it's a very robust, secure hosting environment.
So if I'm coming to you for the first time and I've maybe been building personas for my website and I've got an idea of different personas in the past that I've been maybe building manual journeys for driven via, say, email marketing. So if I've got a fashionista that always wants new in-season trending, I've got a marketing database of people in that kind of category. How do I start working with you to A, import the data I've already got if it's possible, and then B, start building on it for the future?
Sure. So really the first thing you would do, once we've done the integration, the first thing you would do is to say, okay, what are my personas? and per persona, what's the trigger? So in that example you've just given, the trigger is they click on an email link. So that's how you integrate with our system. Then the second question is, okay, if we've established that you're a bargain hunter, what merchandising strategy do you want applied for that session? And that's basically around merchandising blends. It may also be around things like facets. So if you're a bargain hunter, rather than the price facet being at the top, you might want the price facet at the bottom, for example. Whereas if you're a fashionista, you might, if you've got, let's say, new in as a facet, you might want that at the top. So it will let you adjust things like that. And then, how do you keep it going? I mean, I guess you could export, we track everything. We track what's viewed, what's added to basket, what's purchased. So I guess we could export that and you could put that back into your whatever system you're using for segmentation.
And we just had another question from the audience. And you might want to flick back a slide here. They want to know where they can see the platform in action, which I think on the previous slide, you said, is there a session on Monday where they can actually see it?
Yes.
Group demo Monday the 31st at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
And do you offer a new customer a free trial or anything? I'm guessing this is quite a complex bit solution to integrate. But can they actually look at the platform and have a play around before they sign up?
So often what we do when we're talking with new clients is we give them a copy of we call our control panel the console. So we give them a copy of the console and the demo that's tethered to it, and a copy of the tutorial, so they can actually really get to play with it if they want. Generally, our model is either rolling 1 month contract or annual contract. You obviously get a better price for the annual contract. But what we do with the annual contract is we give people a break after 3 months. So for any reason they just don't get on with the platform, then they can break without penalty. And I've found that's a better way than just doing a free trial. The problem with a free trial is there's not a lot of commitment really on either side. Whereas if you make the decision you're going to go with us and you sign up for an annual contract, effectively you've got this break point at 3 months. That is a bit like your trial. And sometimes we have done pricing to enable that as well.
And another question we've had is there specific reporting within the dashboard, or would you need to rely on other tools like Google Analytics, Adobe, or etc.?
Sure, good question. So obviously we support Google Analytics, but we have our own reporting. And the reporting tool is really designed to report on the effectiveness of the different aspects of the platform. So for example, it would report on your merchandising strategies, your merchandising blends, and something we call merchandising templates. So it'll actually show you how effective they're being. It will also report on things like products. So you can see, least viewed, least added to basket, least purchased, most viewed, most added to basket, most purchased. And one of the things I like about it, as well as having things like date range and exporting to Excel, we have this idea of a traffic light system, because for a lot of retailers, even a page worth of data is going to be a long page. So traffic light system lets you specify, well, what things would we consider red, amber, or green. So you can actually set that on your page, and then you can very quickly see things standing out as red or amber, etc. Other things it will do, or it will report on the effectiveness of your category pages. So that's quite useful to know which category pages are producing the fewest click-throughs. And then with search, similar things with search, you've also got a report in search that does low hits or no hits. So the idea here is, let's imagine you're a female fashion site and somebody searches for shirt. It will tell you, well, look, if you search for shirt, you're going to get 0 results, because there's no products that would be returned by that. And therefore you might think, okay, well, is it worth me creating a synonym from shirt to blouse? So if somebody searches for shirt, we would actually search for shirt plus blouse? Or would I want to do a search redirect? So if I search for shirt, we actually get sent to the blouses category. So I think the reporting is really helpful. And obviously I'd encourage people to look at it because it kind of tells you what's happening, and it will show you whether a strategy or a blend is being effective. And it's actually interesting. I was talking with one of our clients the other day who gave us a great quote. But she said to me, it wasn't just about the numbers for her. What she had observed is because the platform was very easy to use, that her merchandisers had become more adventurous in trying out new things. Basically because they knew it'd be easy to try, and also if it doesn't work, it's easy to turn off. And that wasn't the case previously. And I thought that was quite an interesting observation.
So an interesting question is, how much can I use this data, and can I set targets? For instance, you just talk about female fashion. If we've got kind of Christmas jumper season, and we all know that Christmas jumpers, you need to sell them in November, December. No one wants to buy them in January. That's when they end up in TK Maxx. Can I set a target to merchandise something like, I want all my stock sold by, say, 20th of December? And can I then target to maybe expose the Christmas jumpers to a slightly wider audience than just the people that bought one last year? How do I expose it? Should I expose it to everyone? Should I be segmenting people that have previously bought red jumpers? Let's show them Christmas jumpers. Or how would I look to clear out my stock before it is too late?
Sure. So I think what you referred to as a target, we would probably call a schedule. So I might. So bear in mind, I can create a merchandising strategy with a blend and target that at different people. So I might create a merchandising strategy that uses the Christmas jumpers blend, and I might set that on a schedule. So I might set that from the 1st of November to 24th or 20th of December, something like that. In addition to the blend, we've also got something we call merchandising templates. And you could think about the template. The template is a proxy for your page, and it lets you specify exactly where on a page you want something. So you could create a template for your for your Christmas jumpers. And it might just be as simple as like the top row, or it might be some kind of shape. And you could say, when the schedule is on, we're going to put our Christmas jumpers on the first row of every single page, even if you're looking at the page where we're selling shoes. You could do something like that. But I think the target thing is really more about a schedule. And then in terms of, well, who do I target it at? I mean, that kind of goes back to the customer segmentation that you're already doing. And you could, for example, say, okay, I've got a number of different personas, but actually for Christmas jumper persona, perhaps I need to aggregate some of that. So it might be people who've bought one before. It might be blokes in a certain age range. I think we can probably guess that one. But it might also be maybe people who've bought red jumpers before. And that would really be up to the retailer to think about that. But again, back to the example of my client, if something's really easy to do, then people are much more likely to try it. And I think that's one of the important things about the platform.
Now, looking forward, I'm quite interested in what's happening with social channels. And I wondered, how does your merchandising translate to traffic coming from social? We know that currently most purchases on social end up being a website purchase rather than the purchase on the social platform. But should I be segmenting, in your opinion, by this group came from Pinterest, this group came from TikTok, this group came from Insta? Or should I be putting them all in one bucket and trying to segment by, I think this is a a woman, I think this is an older person, I think this is a child, I think this is a man. How do you actually sort of gauge that traffic that's coming from a platform where you don't know what they've just previously been clicking on? They're not logged in, you just know they've come from a social channel.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a very good point, Chris. And I think it's also a good point that most purchases through social channels do end up on a website. I think that's quite interesting. So really, I mean, the background to all of this is the fact that third-party cookies are going away. And it just makes it so much harder to know who you are. What's attractive about social channels is they tend to be a little bit self-selecting. So if somebody's coming from Facebook, they probably are a different audience from somebody who's coming from TikTok or one of the other channels. So you could think about that. And I guess some of that is observed behavior. So in the same way, an observed behavior is people that purchase using an iPhone or an iPad tend to be less price sensitive than people who purchase on an Android. But you know, it's not 100% true, is it? It's kind of a broad trend, but not true in every case. So you have to think about that. Something else to think about actually is when you look at product recommendation. So a lot of people take the person as the starting point, but you know, there's a role for taking the product as the starting point. And the reason to do that is if you take the product as a starting point, the first thing is there are a lot more data points per product than there are per people. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know,
you know what they are.
Yeah, I mean, for example, you know, I took up running about 5 years ago, and there are like 2 or 3 sites that I tend to go to, but you know, I probably go to them 2 or 3 times a year. So the data points they have on me are quite limited. Whereas if I go and look at a pair of running shoes, you've got all the, you know, everybody's ever looked at that shoe. What did they end up adding to basket? What else do they look at? What do they search for? What do they end up buying? So you've got a lot, you know, the more data you have, the richer your recommendations can be. Also, actually, if you take the product as a starting point, then it doesn't matter who's buying it. It doesn't matter if I'm buying it for myself. It doesn't matter if I'm buying it for my auntie. You know, this, it still holds true. What else did you look for? What do you end up buying? So, you know, we use a mixture of kind of persona merchandising and effectively product-based merchandising.
And I think the product-based is interesting because I tend to buy Lego twice a year. It's my nephew's birthday. I've got 2 of them.
Right.
But I haven't bought Lego for myself for, I don't know, 30, 40 years or something.
I was going to say, hopefully not for a long time.
Yeah. Although fascinated by Lego Technics, but that's another story. Yeah. But yeah, I'm guessing that if you looked at my persona, you probably wouldn't know I was in the market for Lego. But as soon as I click on Lego, you can, okay, maybe I've clicked on a Lego vehicle or a Star Wars Lego or a Harry Potter Lego. You can then show me other Harry Potter Lego, or you could show me other Harry Potter merchandise. I guess that the product makes an awful lot of sense.
Yes.
But is there a danger that I'm going to lose some of the joy of discoverability on your website if you're looking at, you've looked at Harry Potter Lego, let's show you other Harry Potter merchandise and other Harry Potter Lego. Am I going to be missing out on maybe Spider-Man stuff? Because
exactly, and this is back to the X Factor example. If you just stick within that kind of self-contained system, eventually everything looks the same, and you're not differentiating yourself from the competition. And this is why I say don't over-rely on AI. You need a merchandiser's mind that can look at something and think, well, actually, if you're into Harry Potter, you might be interested in Spider-Man, or you might be interested in Superman. So, or you know, there's something new. We've just bought into a new line of merchandise. I need to expose you to it. And it's a really good point, Chris.
So how adventurous should we allow our merchandisers to be? How much leeway should we give them? I mean, there's a huge danger between sales targets, sell what sells, merchandise what sells, and let's trust the computers because we can't be sacked for doing what the computer told us, to, at the other end, taking massive risks and ignoring everything the computer's telling us to merchandise product that maybe no one wants to buy. There's a happy ground in the middle, but how much freedom should we be giving merchandisers, and how do you judge when too much freedom is too much?
Well, I mean, I guess this is a $64,000 question, isn't it? I mean, one approach might be to say, well, look, why don't we just be adventurous with one category? Let's just look at one category. You know, probably take your worst performing category. You've got nothing to lose then. Almost anything you do is probably bound to improve it. You know, and as I mentioned, you know, with this client, they said that was their observation. Because it was easy to make changes, they became more adventurous. So, you know, generally merchandisers know how to sell their stuff. It's just traditionally it's been very constrained, very difficult to do on most e-com platforms. So, I mean, I would just say, look, don't go wild, but, you know, pick your worst performing category. Let them have a go with that.
And let's say we pick the worst performing category. We're doing some experiments with it. How long should we run those experiments for? And I don't mind if it's you should run it for a week, or you should run it till you've had 10,000 views on that category. But how do you judge when you can actually measure success? Is it time? Is it views? Is it sales?
Well, it's probably a combination of those. And I think it also does depend to some degree what it is you're selling. You know, if I'm selling high turnover fashion, I'll know very quickly. If I'm selling high-end furniture or homeware, you know, it might actually take me, you know, a month or 3 months or a whole season to know whether that was really successful. So I think it does. I think the timing depends on the type of thing you're selling. How do you measure it? Well, as I say, we report on everything, so you'll know instantly the change in views, clicks, add to baskets. How should you measure that? Well, it's probably a mixture of things like conversion rate, average order value, and then the one that everybody forgets, returns.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like,
you might not know for another couple of weeks after.
Exactly. But I mean, in terms of, you know, we do include that as an option within our merchandising blends. Returns and cancelled orders, I think, are almost as important as conversion rate and average order value.
Listen, Andre, this is absolutely fascinating, but we are fast running out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. So just before we go, what can people expect from your group demo, which, as a reminder, is on next Monday, the 31st of January at 4 p.m, and go to the Advanced Commerce booth on the Tame Bay Live platform, or email Andre at advancedcommerce.io to get booked in on it. But what can people expect to see in that session? So
they'll get a slide deck that will just explain what visual merchandising is all about and how our platform works. And then they'll get a demo, which is based on 2 demo sites, and that will give them a complete overview of how the platform works and what you can do with it. And as I say, generally, people comment on the user interface seems really easy to use, and that's not because I asked them that. That's people just offer that up. So book in for that group demo on next Monday, and if you're watching this on demand after the event, then drop Andre an email, which is andre@advancedcommerce.io, to find out more.